Archaic Records.
Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Archaic Records here with you again. My name is Jamie, coming to you from Nashville, Tennessee. And today we're going to go back to 1975 to take a look at a record that, if it isn't one of the greatest, which it is, it certainly is one of the most celebrated live albums of all time. And that is the almighty Kiss Alive. Now, by mid-1975, the band Kiss had released 3 studio albums. Their self-titled debut, Hotter Than Hell and Dressed to Kill, all of which at the time I think sold, moderately well. That being said, the band were certainly disappointed by the record's overall performance out in the marketplace. And by 1975, the band, despite the fact that they had somewhat lackluster record sales, they were completely ignored by FM radio and despised by critics. This band was successful in building this huge legion, dare I say army, of fans based on their bombastic, over-the-top, snotty stage show. And by 1975, the band were looking for a way to somehow capture their live spirit and put it onto record, something that the band had failed to do, at least in my opinion, on their first 3 studio records. Now, that's not to say that those first 3 studio records aren't great, because they absolutely are. But at that point in time, those records had not really captured what the band was really all about. Paul Stanley himself has said on many occasions, if you've never seen Kiss live, you don't fully understand what the band is all about. So in 1975, the band came up with a strategy, something at the time was thought of at best as being a Hail Mary, and at worst being an all-out surrender. And that is that the band was going to release not only a live album, which live albums in 1975 were completely out of fashion. They weren't really done anymore. But they were going to release a double live album. This was a move that their record label, Casablanca Records, who were in financial crises of their own, this was something that the label saw as the band basically waving a white flag. I remember seeing an interview one time with Gene Simmons where he talked about the idea of what would become Kiss Alive, and basically he summed it up by saying, if this was our swan song, if this is how we were going to go out as a band, at least it wouldn't really cost us anything. And if nothing else, we might actually make a little bit of money on the tour. So the band came up with the idea in the summer of 1975 that they would go out on the road, and like I said, not only record a live album, but record their entire set for what would turn into a double live album, something at the time, like I said, was thought of in the industry as basically waving the white flag. So in May of 1975, the band recorded a show in Detroit. On June 21st, they recorded a show in Cleveland. July 20th, they recorded a show in Davenport, Iowa. And July 23rd, they recorded a show in Wildwoods, New Jersey. Now, these were all cities in the past that had been, hotbeds of not only all hard rock, but Kiss shows in particular. And the band specifically chose the cities that they recorded in for this record. It was no mistake. The cities that the band chose to record in, these were cities that the band had always performed very well in. At the end of the recording process, the band takes these tapes into the studio with producer Eddie Kramer, and apparently, according to everything I've seen and read, the band not only were they disappointed by the results of the live tapes, but they were pretty devastated by what they heard, which is not to say that the performances on these records weren't energetic and they didn't capture the spirit of the show, but really, according to what Gene and Paul have said about these recordings, is they were just so sort of, they were so flawed in the performance, and flat vocals and missed notes, and of course, except Peter Criss, who Peter Criss acknowledges, or has claimed at least, that his performance on the recordings for this record didn't need to be touched up at all. So the band decided to go into the studio with producer Eddie Kramer, and as Gene Simmons himself put it, decided to put Band-Aids on some of the things that needed to be touched up throughout the recording. Now, this is something that, of course, has created a lot of controversy within the KISS fan community. It seems like everything the band does creates controversy within the KISS fan community. That's one thing I love, though, about KISS fans. And I am not a super diehard KISS fan. My KISS fandom, I would say I'm a pretty diehard fan of the band through the first era. I would say from the first album up through Creatures of the Dark. I would even argue into The Elder, which I actually really do like The Elder. Now, beyond that, to me, they get a little bit spotty. There's a lot of clunkage in their catalog past that, as far as I'm concerned. Now, the stuff I like, sort of past that era, I really like a lot. But there's a lot of stuff in there, man, that's pretty rough, at least as far as I'm concerned. But one thing I love about KISS fans is their absolute undying love and passion and fire for this band. And I love those conversations and those arguments you get into with other people that, worship at the altar of this band. And that's one thing that's created a lot of controversy, within the fan base of KISS, and even some people that maybe aren't even KISS fans that, whether you consider this record to be a live record or not. It was, do you take the band at face value? Something that Gene Simmons says, where they said, oh yeah, we went in there, we touched up a few things, we put Band-Aids where they needed to be put, but generally, overall speaking, the performance and the energy of the performance sort of, is, it's intact, it has its integrity. Or, was this something where, like I said, you go and you do some spot painting, maybe you shampoo the carpets, or was this like a complete remodel? Because I think in one case you could make the argument that Kiss Alive is still a live album. The other one, if you go in and you basically re-record everything, then maybe you're having a different conversation. But as far as I'm concerned, I mean, this is just Kiss as far as I'm concerned. This is not a band that is necessarily, they're not translating the Old Testament. This isn't high art. This is Kiss. This is a band that isn't meant to go out and change the world. This isn't a band that's ever hid behind, or I shouldn't say hid behind, this isn't a band that's ever gone out and claimed to have the most integrity in the world. This is a band that was a party band. This was a band that was meant to have people go out and have a good time. And if you listen to this record, at least as far as I'm concerned, I think that this record accomplishes that. Now, the one thing that the band admits that I don't necessarily love when it comes to, the production work on this record is I don't necessarily love the fact that they overdubbed the crowd. Now, Eddie Kramer, when interviewed about this record, he's maintained that the crowd was there and the crowd was great, but there just wasn't enough of it in terms of the volume on the record. So what they did was they took sort of a greatest hits of crowd recordings and they sort of overdubbed it onto the record. To me, now you can go in and you can do a lot of patchwork on the actual music as far as I'm concerned, but overdubbing the crowd is where it sort of gets a little bit weird in my opinion. Not enough to where it makes me not enjoy this record. This is probably my favorite album in the Kiss catalog. If I had to choose one record to take with me, sort of the desert island, sort of scenario when it comes to the Kiss catalog, I mean, Kiss Alive is probably my favorite record. This is probably the record I'm taking with me. I mean, if you're a record collector, this record is an essential. I mean, if you don't own this record, quite frankly, I don't know if you have the right to call yourself a record collector. Yeah, I'm making the rules around here, all right? But as far as I'm concerned, like I said, I love all of the early Kiss catalog, the first era. But to me, this is probably my favorite record. And if, like I said, desert scenario, if I can only take one record with me, this would probably be it, which would mean that I would have to forfeit having my favorite Kiss song of all time, which is King of the Nighttime World. That being said, all the touch-ups and all of the studio tricks, notwithstanding, I mean, this is still, like I said, this is one of my favorite live records of all time. I do consider it to be a live record. I think this is one of the greatest live records ever made, and I would agree with the things that Paul Stanley has said. If you haven't ever seen Kiss live, that's something that, I do agree that until you see Kiss live, you don't really understand what the appeal is. I've talked to a lot of people over the years who don't understand Kiss. They don't understand why people listen to Kiss. They think it's moronic. They think it's juvenile. But until you go out and you see the band perform live, you really don't get it. Because as far as I'm concerned, at least in my concert-going life, I mean, I personally have never seen a show like Kiss by any other band. They are completely, unapologetically self-indulgent. It is bombastic. It is huge. It has a certain energy. There's a certain energy to Kiss shows that you really can't even describe to people in words. But I do think that this record sort of captures that spirit. And in that sense, it's not surprising that as soon as this record comes out, they instantly become one of the biggest bands in the world. People who didn't understand Kiss at the time now suddenly get it. And now people who haven't seen Kiss, people who are not part of this huge legion of fans that were obsessed with going to see Kiss live. Now this record is sending a whole new wave of fans into the shows. And like I said, by this point in time, they become one of the biggest bands in the world. I assume people are suddenly now going back and buying those studio albums. Those first 3 studio albums are all albums that I love. I love the first record. I love Hotter Than Hell. Of the first 3 records, Hotter Than Hell is probably my favorite of the first 3 records. Hotter Than Hell actually has one of my favorite Kiss deep cuts on it, which is Mainline. Man, I love that song. Like I said, this record was produced by Eddie Kramer. It came out on September 10th, 1975, and this record just completely altered the trajectory of a band that at the time was semi-fledgling, at least in terms of record sales. I love the artwork. I mean, to me, this is one of the greatest album covers, by any band ever, as far as I'm concerned. But the thing I love the most about this record cover is I love the back. I love these 2 kids. Of course, look at the size of that arena. Again, this was a band that was probably, when this picture was taken, they probably weren't necessarily selling a ton of studio records, but just look at that audience based on the reputation of their live shows. But I love these 2 kids. I always maintain, and I'm a pretty big Kiss fan. I would say that I'm a big, moderate Kiss fan. I'm not necessarily, the hugest Kiss fan in the world. But I always picture myself, if I were this age in 1975, like these 2 kids, this would be me. I would be a diehard Kiss fan in 1975. I always picture this being me and my best friend Tim back in high school. Now, I would be the blonde one because I was blonde. And that would be Tim. And Tim would basically be saying to me right now, are you seriously telling me that you think that Hawkeye could beat up Colossus? I mean, are you really kidding me? And then I would be saying, well, Hawkeye could shoot Colossus from an arrow from 100 yards away, and Colossus would never even understand what hit him. He would never even know anything was going to happen. I mean, are we really having a conversation about this or not? I mean, do you want to wax intellectually? Of course, when we were in high school, we couldn't figure out why we weren't exactly chick magnets. But I always assumed that would have been me and my best friend Tim if we were in high school in 1975. I love that picture. I love the packaging. Of course, this record on the inside, it has the 4 letters from the band members. This record starts off on side 1, of course, with the song Deuce. This song is a Gene Simmons song. Supposedly the bass line from the song was inspired by the Rolling Stones song Bitch. Basically, this song is about, a man who works hard all day. He comes home, and the least his woman can do is sort of, have dinner on the table, provide, a clean house, and perhaps some other services when the man returns home from work. This song, of course, is the song that got Gene Simmons recognized by the National Organization of Women because of his forward thinking in terms of traditional gender roles. When he was asked about this honor that he was bestowed upon him from the National Organization of Women, Gene Simmons said, "Honored? I'd rather be inner." That's a great thing about Gene Simmons, though, is that Gene Simmons is one of those guys, when he writes songs, especially back in the 1970s, although still to this day, Gene Simmons is one of those guys who genuinely, and it's fashionable to say this, about yourself, to be like one of those people like, "I don't care what anybody thinks about me, ever." But with Gene Simmons, you get the sense that it's true, and it was true in 1975, certainly, and it's still true today in 2024. Gene Simmons is one of those guys. Now, is it a positive trait or not? I don't really know. But Gene Simmons is one of those guys who genuinely does not care what anybody thinks about him. And it comes through in his songwriting. I actually really love the song Deuce. I love this version of it. And one of the high points for me on this entire record is the guitar work of Ace Frehley. He is just peppered throughout this entire record. Now, I've said it in the past on this channel, I'm not somebody who necessarily goes for the whole like doodly 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 guitar solo type of music, but when it comes to that style of music or that style of guitar playing, I would take Ace Frehley as probably being my favorite guitarist over any of the other heavy hitters, if you know what I mean. People like Eddie Van Halen or Joe Satriani or Yngwie or Steve Vai. I love Ace Frehley's playing throughout this entire album, really throughout his entire run with the band into his solo career. He's one of my favorite, guitar players of all time in terms of that school. After that, the next song is called Strutter. I love the song Strutter. The thing that this song always makes me think of is the scene in Detroit Rock City where Edward Furlong is stripping in order to win money to buy his what were stolen Kiss tickets. I love that scene. For one thing, the movie Detroit Rock City is one of my favorite coming-of-age movies of all time. I mentioned a second ago that if I were this age in 1975, I probably would have been one of these two kids. But every time I watch the movie Detroit Rock City, it always makes me wish that I was a Kiss fan growing up in the 1970s. Those kids at that time, at that age, in that movie. Now, sort of an unrelated topic. I actually, as weird as it sounds, I actually met Edward Furlong one time through my job in Seattle back in the early 2000 teens. I was working at a place in Seattle where he came into he was working on a film that they filmed a scene at in my work. They were filming a movie called Matt's Chance, which if you have the opportunity to see the movie Matt's Chance, I would pass on it, my friends, if I were you. It is literally one of the worst movies I've ever seen. And I say this as somebody who is a huge Edward Furlong fan. I mean, this was Pecker. This was the guy from Terminator 2. This was American History X, Detroit Rock City, one of my favorite movies of all time. But Matt's Chance is not one of those. I have to say that when I met him, though, he was incredibly friendly. Couldn't have been any more nice to the people that I worked with. We all got to kind of hang out, watch some of the filming. It was cool. I never got to see how a movie was made or anything like that. So that was pretty cool. Like I said, he was a very nice guy. I love the song Strutter. I love this version of it. Again, the Ace guitar on here is unbelievable. The next song after that is Got to Choose. Man, I really love this song. This is a song about basically having a girl that's cheating on you. You find out about it. Basically, you tell her, hey, you got to make a choice. It's either him or me. I love this version of this song. I love Paul's vocals on it. This song has great energy. Side 1 continues with the song Hotter Than Hell. Lyrically, I love this song. But musically, this song has always, to me, it's always been like a little bit clunky. It doesn't really have like a great flow to it. Lyrically, I really love this song. I love Ace's performance on this version of it. And as far as the performance of it goes, it's as true to the record or any other version I've ever heard. I don't love the song Hotter Than Hell, even though I really love the lyrics to that song. Side 1 ends with Firehouse. This is another one of my favorite live songs from early on, from this era when it came to the band performing certain songs live. I love this song. Of course, you always picture it with Paul, with the little fire helmet on. To me, this song is about somebody that's sort of bad for you, but you can't help sort of being attracted to them. The song reminds me of an ex-girlfriend I had. Her and I were very volatile together. We had this really sort of, honestly, kind of an ugly, nasty relationship, but there was something about her that I just couldn't shake. There was just something about her that I just kept drawing me back in. And eventually when things ended, they had to end. Basically, it's like ripping a Band-Aid off. I realized that is a really terrible pun. But really, that's how I had to end that relationship. Eventually, it was just like I just had to leave. I couldn't, because I just kept coming back to it. And we were terrible for each other. Again, I love Ace's guitar work on this song. He is probably my favorite guitar player in this sort of genre. The next song after that is Nothing to Lose. This is a Gene song. If you're a Kiss fan, you know what this song is about. This song has sort of interesting subject matter. Now, the subject matter in this song is not a situation that I have ever been in. It's something that for some reason has never really interested me or appealed to me. I do know people, and I've had friends in the past that were relatively obsessed, I would say, with this particular activity. I have a friend, he and I are still friends, but he is somebody who is just really into this. And he will, according to what he says, now sometimes, some people act tough, some people talk tougher than they are, when they're actually with the people, that they're with. It's easy to be the sort of, tough boyfriend when you're away from your chick or whatever. But I have a friend, he swears that he will end relationships over this particular topic. I had a friend back in the day when I was living in the Bay Area back in the mid 90s, and he was really into this activity as well. And apparently he started dating this girl, and he introduced this activity to her, and apparently, according to him, again, this could just be, guy talk, this could be locker room bravado, but apparently it altered her life to the point to where that was pretty much all she wanted, and he was somebody who was pretty obsessed with it, I would say, but he told me he actually kind of got bored of it after a while. Like I said, this is an activity I've never really partaken in. It's not something that I find to be super interesting, to be honest with you. I don't know why. It's just something that's never really appealed to me. According to Gene, though, you've got nothing to lose by trying it. I might disagree with that. To be perfectly honest with you. Maybe I'm just the one that's uptight. No judgment. If this is like your sort of luggage, it really isn't mine. The next song after that is Come On and Love Me. I love this song. One of my favorite Kiss lyrics of all time, and I don't know what it is. It's just something that's just so catchy and cool, and every time I hear it, it kind of gets stuck in my head, is the beginning of this song when he talks about she's a dancer, a romancer, I'm a Capricorn, and she's a Cancer. Man, I really love those lyrics. It's just something that's just so catchy. Something that's very like Kiss specifically about those lyrics. I love the song Come On and Love Me. It's one of my favorite performances on this record. which to me, there isn't a single bad performance on this record. Now, like I said at the beginning, you could argue how much of it is live, how much of it is, studio antics, if you will. But I love Come On and Love Me. After that is the song Parasite. This is one of my favorite Kiss songs in the entire catalog. I love the guitar on this song. I love this performance of it. To me, this song is about a girl that is basically too clingy. Sort of a one-night stand that perhaps doesn't understand that she is a one-night stand. And to me, this song reminds me of a girl that I hung out with. Now, I will not say dated, but this song reminds me of a girl that I hung out with back, I believe it was in very kind of early 2000. It was not long after I moved to Seattle from my hometown my home area in the Bay Area. I moved to Seattle, and I had this coworker, and he and I were friendly. We weren't necessarily friends, but we were friendly. And that group where I worked, this place I worked, there was like 4 or 5 of us who hung out outside of work a lot. We became kind of good friends. Me and one guy in particular became really good friends, and then there were sort of other people that were kind of in our loose circle, and this guy was kind of in our loose circle. But he and I were friendly, and he told me one day that he had this friend, and he thought that I would really like her, and he wanted to know if I wanted to be introduced to her. And of course, at the time, I was like, yeah, why not? I'm 23 years old. I don't have any commitments, really. So yeah, I'd totally be interested in meeting your friends. So over the course of next few days, he ends up introducing me to this girl, and her and I hang out a few times, and it's going okay. She was somebody who was attractive. She was interesting. She was fun to hang out with. She made me laugh. But she wasn't somebody that I necessarily had these ultra strong feelings for. Now, eventually, one thing led to another, and we ended up hooking up in my apartment one night. And after we sort of hooked up, she began telling me about her roommate and how her and her roommate did not get along. Now, her and her roommate were not friends, I guess, before they had become roommates. They met to become roommates because they were both students, basically. And she didn't get along with her roommate, and she didn't like being at home, and she didn't feel comfortable around her. Now, I had met the roommate on an occasion. The roommate seemed nice enough to me. Now, of course, anybody can put on a fake face in front of a visitor. But because I am not a very smart person, and I am a people pleaser, which are 2 of my lesser traits, I must say, I had a spare key to my apartment. And I told her, I was like, well, hey, if you're ever having static at home, here, take this spare key. You can come hang out in my apartment. I live alone. I'm not here a lot. So just come hang out, and, it's no big deal. And over the course of the next couple weeks, it seemed like every time I came home, this girl was in my apartment. And that was really not kind of what I signed up for. Now, yes, we had hooked up, but I still did not think of this as a relationship. I did not think of this as a girl that I was dating. And one day I came home and I just was not in the mood to have somebody in my house. I just wanted to be alone. I'm like that. I've always been like that, and I'm like that today. So I came home, and I was not being particularly nice to her, I'll be honest with you. And she kind of got the hint. She's like, oh, did you want me to leave? And I was kind of like, yeah, I just kind of like to be alone. I mean, this is sort of becoming a lot. You're always here. And that wasn't really what I thought that this was going to be about. And she's like, okay, that's no problem. I'll leave. And so she left, and over the next few days, I didn't hear from her. So I thought, okay, kind of got rid of that situation, as cold as that sounds. That's the way I was thinking. I was like, oh, well, thank God that's over, because, her and I weren't really going anywhere. And, I had also just come out of my first, I wasn't really looking for a relationship. I had just come out of my first, serious breakup. I was living alone. I was in a new city. I had friends. I had freedom. I had my own apartment. I had a job that I liked going to. So I wasn't really, looking for anything serious. So, I thought, okay, I remedied that. She's gone. She hasn't been hanging out here when I get home lately, which at least is a good thing. So a few days later, I come home one night, and in my kitchen, I realized that she had taken a bunch of Post-it notes, and she had just put them all over my kitchen, all over the cupboards and the refrigerator and the countertops. And it was all these little cute, lovey, I love you, XOXO, I miss you type notes. And it just didn't sit right with me. It really made me very unhappy. I didn't like it. For one thing, she hadn't been around for a while. I hadn't seen her. And I didn't really like the fact that she was in my apartment. Yes, I gave her a key, but I didn't like the fact that she was in my apartment when I wasn't there, and I really hated this whole cutesy, lovey-dovey note thing. It creeped me out. It gave me the chills, honestly. So I call her, and I'm like, hey, I think I'm going to need my key back. I don't think this is really working out. This isn't really what I had in mind. And so she's like, okay, fine. I'll come over. I'll talk to you. I'll give you your key back. Maybe we can work it out or whatever. So she comes over, and she gives me my key, and I explained to her that, hey, I didn't like that. I don't really go for stuff like that. It kind of creeped me out. I don't really like the fact that you're always in my apartment. And she was very upset. She was telling me how much she liked me, and she thought that this was going somewhere. She thought we were a couple, and again, I may have led her on physically, which I'm not proud of. This is not my proudest moment here. But basically, I tell her, I was like, hey, we're not together. I don't know what you're thinking, but it's not like that. And I don't even know how it starts, but pretty soon her and I are basically making out, and I'll spare you the details, but we end up hooking up again right there when I'm trying to get rid of her. And as soon as we finished our roughhousing, basically she told me that she loved me. And pretty much without batting an eye, I told her that she had to leave and that I didn't think we should see each other again. And I can tell you from firsthand experience that there's really nothing sadder than watching a girl cry and get dressed at the same time. It's a situation that I hope to never be put in again. Now, again, I'm not saying this as if I'm a great guy. This is something that I regret doing because I didn't know how to handle the situation. Now, many years later, and I'm not trying to paint myself in a more positive light, but many years later, I ran into that guy who I worked with. Now, of course, right after that happened, and he heard about my behavior. Working with him was not quite as much fun as it was before because I was suddenly this giant asshole, which I'm not denying. But many years later, I ran into him on a city bus in Seattle. And, it was all water under the bridge. So we had a pleasant enough sort of fake conversation. But he told me that he and that girl ended up getting married, and they had been married for many years. So I guess it has a happy ending at least for them. But that's what that song Parasite always reminds me, because I always think of that song as being sort of a song about a girl that, you don't want to hurt her feelings necessarily, but you're being a little clingy. Just, I need some space here, man. This is like I have a little perimeter around here. After that, the next song ends side 2, which is a song called She, another song I absolutely love. This is, again, another sort of typical Gene song. Now, I have been put in this situation before, thankfully, and this is one of those situations that, as a young kid, when you first discover girls, or you sort of start having hormonal feelings, at a certain point, at least for me, at a certain age, my hormones really kind of took over, and it became hard to live within my own skin sometimes, especially during puberty, to be honest with you. But I remember the first time, you always think about the first time you're going to be in this situation. And you're just be like the coolest guy ever. It's like, yep, pretty good. That's pretty good. But for me, I can assure you that the first time I was put in this position, first off, you can't believe, at least I couldn't believe, it's actually happening. Like, I built this up into my head as such a thing. I was like obsessed with this thing for so long, like high school, And then, your first year or so after high school, this just becomes like your life. I mean, this is life, and then everything else is, sort of secondary to this. And then when this happens, you picture yourself being like the Fonz. But I can assure you, the first time I was put in this position, I was very awkward, uncool. I remember I was just like, oh my God, this is real. The other person's like, you okay up there? He's like, no, I'm good, man. I'm good. Life is good. Didn't exactly turn out to be the coolest gent in the world during my first encounter with this activity, but it is a very typical Gene song. I love this song. I love the bass line on this song. This version of it just slaughters. This is one of my favorite, bass lines in the entire Kiss catalog. And of course, Gene or Ace's guitar solo on this is just awesome. Side 3 starts off with a song called "Watching You." I always pictured this song in my head as, I love this song, and I really like this version of it. But I pictured this song, you're sitting in a coffee shop with your friend who's really kind of like going through it right now. He's just kind of being put through the ringer. And he just kind of like wants somebody to talk to. He really wants to sort of air it all out. And, he needs advice, really. He just needs you to hear him and maybe, see how you assess what he's going through and kind of maybe like nudge him in this direction or that direction. And you're sitting there and you're trying to be a good friend and you're listening and yeah, I hear you. But you're facing the door of the coffee shop and suddenly over here you see this girl walk in who is just the most amazing thing you've ever seen. I mean, she is like a poem and you can't take your eyes off her. And as your friend's talking, you're just kind of like following her around with your eyes and you can't take your eyes off her. You can't stop thinking about her. And your friend is over here, and he's just like pouring his guts out. He's got his heart on the table, and he's like showing you, he's cutting it open, he's showing you all the pain and all the agony that he's going through. He's like, yeah, man. Oh, I get you. Whew, that's tough. Yeah, I don't know. What are you going to do about that? Yeah, really. I mean, yeah, she's wrong, dude. You're a great guy. I don't know what's going on. That's what this song always reminds me of. This, you're trying to be there for your friend, but man, you're looking over here, and this girl's just like the things, there's nothing else in the world besides your eyes and her. And whatever he's talking about is just noise. Not even noise. It doesn't even exist. After that, the next song is 100,000 Years. I love this song. This song is very snotty. This song to me has always been, it's like a reaction to an overly demanding, sort of naggy chick. That, as soon as you walk in the door from wherever you are, you walk into this, the eye of a storm that's like 1,000 questions. Where have you been? What were you doing? What's her name? Do you have receipts for where you were? I'm going to call your friend and make sure you were with him. That's sort of what this song makes me think of. And I love the tone in Paul's vocals. I love how snotty and sort of condescending it is. Sort of abrasive. It's like, hey, back off, all right? I know it's been a real pain without me being here for the last 5 minutes, but it's really, not that big of a deal. I'm sure you were able to survive. I love his smart-ass tone on the song. I love the song 100,000 Years. The one thing I'll say about this particular version of it, however, is this particular version of it lasts almost 100,000 years. It's over 13 minutes long, which to me, for me, and sort of my musical, palette or my sort of threshold for songs, I mean, to me, that's over the line as far as I'm concerned, as far as the length of the song. But it's a great song. I've always loved the song 100,000 Years. This version of it is cool. Just, man, it's way too long. After that is the song Black Diamond. Man, I love this song. This is another one of my favorite Kiss songs. This song is, obviously the song is well known as being about some of the prostitutes that, Paul Stanley used to see around New York City. Black Diamond is probably the queen of the prostitutes. Man, Ace Frehley's guitar work on this song is just snug. And after this song, this ends side 3. You hear all the bombs going off. This is sort of the end of the main set of the show. Side 4 starts off with a song called Rock Bottom. To me, this song it's okay. If I had to pick a least favorite song on Alive, it would probably be this one. I mean, I like the song. It's okay. This version of it is good. It's true enough to the the album version. I would say either Rock Bottom or Hotter Than Hell, as far as songs go, are probably my two least favorite songs on the record. This version of it is okay. To me, the song is basically about just being mistreated, generally mistreated by the partner in your life, and it's just like rock bottom. It's like, man, it's like, this sucks. Every time I come home, every time I'm around this person, I'm just treated like a doormat. It's just, the song's very miserable. It's like very unhappy. I always kind of like the song Rock Bottom. It's not my favorite. After that is the song Cold Gin. Man, I love this song. Of course, if you've ever seen Kiss live, this song always has these sort of the Paul Stanley intro, which he's very known for. Ironically, of course, the song was written by Ace Frehley, who is a Hall of Fame alcoholic. Sung by Gene Simmons, somebody who claims that he never drinks, or maybe if he does drink, it's very, very limited occasions. Some people have told me that he admits to drinking champagne from time to time. I haven't really seen that myself. But I love the song Cold Gin. I love the guitar playing on this one. The one thing about singing the song live always is the sort of the Paul Stanley, shtick at the beginning of the song. It's okay. It on this, mercifully, on this version on this record, the intro is somewhat abbreviated. I've seen and heard, live recordings where it just goes on and on and on for too long. I like the song Cold Gin. After that is the song which broke the album, broke the band, and really sent this band into a whole nother stratosphere, and that is Rock and Roll All Night. I love this version of this song. I never get tired of it. I actually like the studio version a lot too. Now this version of it destroys it. According to the band, this song was written not really at the pressure of the record company, but the record company persuaded the band to write sort of an autobiographical anthem. Like, what is this band all about? What is Kiss? So this was the song that they came up with. I mean, this is a version of this song I never get tired of. I've heard this version of this song 10,000 times, and I never get tired of it. I love this version on this record. I like the studio version just as much. Well, not just as much. That's not accurate. This is great. This is easily one of the best songs on the record. I know that's a pretty generic choice, but I would stand by that. And then the record ends with a song called Let Me Go Rock and Roll. One of my favorite Ace performances on the record. Lyrically, this song is simple, even for Kiss standards, but I think it's a good way to close out the set. It is a good way to close out the anthem. Now, there's a famous story about this song in particular, where Elvis's stepbrother, his name was Rick Stanley, he was listening to this record, and when Elvis himself walked in the room and, thinking that Elvis would hate the record, he immediately pulled the needle off the record. Elvis was not necessarily a big fan of things that were hard rock, especially something probably like Kiss. You can't imagine Elvis being necessarily a big Kiss fan, but Elvis asked him what the record was, which it was Kiss Alive. It was the last song, Let Me Go Rock and Roll. And apparently Elvis himself asked Rick Stanley to put the record back on because he wanted to hear the song, and actually became quite a big fan of the song, at least in an interview I saw one time with Elvis's stepbrother, Rick Stanley. So that song won the approval of the king, which I think is pretty snug. Anyway, man, if you haven't gone back and checked out Kiss Alive in a long time, you definitely should. Like I said, if you're a record collector, this is an absolute essential. I think if you don't own this record, you maybe shouldn't even be allowed to call yourself a record collector. Also, when you commit to the lifestyle of record collecting, I don't think it'd be a bad idea that this record was just sort of given to you as a part of your vow of poverty, which is what being a record collector basically is. Like I said, this is probably my favorite album in Kiss's catalog. This is definitely the record that broke their career. It's a record that I listen to still all the time. I listen to this record probably even up till today. I mean, I bought my first copy of Kiss Alive probably back in the early 2000s was the first time I bought Kiss Alive. I first started listening to Kiss through a coworker of mine. I had this sort of preconceived idea for a long time that I didn't like Kiss based on the fact that I was like Mr. Joe punk rock guy. And anything that wasn't like that, of course, I was much more closed-minded back in those days. But anything that didn't, sort of toe that company line, I was opposed to. But I had a friend who, he and I used to go and listen to records all the time, and at his house. And one day he was like, I just want to listen to some Kiss. Which album do you want to hear? And I was like, I don't want to hear Kiss. Kiss suck. And he's basically, no, you're not allowed to say that. You're not allowed to say that in this house. And basically he put on a Kiss record. And at first I was sitting there with my arms folded, a defiant sneer resting upon my face. But over time, we listened to a couple records. I think the first one I listened to with him was Destroyer, probably. By the end of the night, I was pretty interested in what Kiss was all about. And Kiss Alive wasn't the first record I bought. I do remember the first Kiss album I ever bought was Destroyer, but Kiss Alive was not long after that. Probably still my favorite record in their catalog. Like I said, if I had to choose only one that I could listen to for the rest of my life, I would hate that decision. Not going to lie to you. But it probably would be Kiss Alive from September of 1975. I mean, I'm an old man, and I wasn't even born yet when this record came out, so I love it. Anyway, man, thank you so much for checking out this video. This is Archaic Records. My name is Jamie, coming to you from Nashville, Tennessee. Be sure to go out and support your local record store. Check back every week for Morrissey Monday, a weekly celebration of all things Morrissey and the Smiths, as well as other record content and album reviews throughout the week. And until next time, my friends, talk to you then.